There's a quiet experience that some people have when they enter a room. Nothing dramatic has happened, no one has said anything unusual, and yet, within a few moments, something begins to register. You notice the tone of the conversation, the way someone responds to another person's voice, the subtle shift in energy when someone new walks in. Most people sense these things occasionally, but for some people, the awareness goes deeper than that. They don't just notice the atmosphere, they begin feeling responsible for it. If the room feels tense, part of their mind begins searching for a way to ease it. If someone seems uncomfortable, they feel the quiet urge to soften the moment. And when the emotional tone of the room shifts, their awareness shifts with it. Over time, this can create a subtle pattern, not just noticing emotional dynamics, but feeling as though it is somehow your role to stabilize them. And eventually the question begins to appear. Why do some people naturally feel responsible for the emotional tone of a room, even when no one asks them to be? For many people, this experience begins with awareness, a natural sensitivity to emotional signals. You may notice small changes in someone's tone, the hesitation before a person responds, or the way a conversation suddenly becomes slightly tense. Often, these signals are subtle, so subtle that most people pass right by them. But when your mind becomes skilled at reading emotional cues, those signals become difficult to ignore. You begin noticing when someone feels uncomfortable, when tension begins forming beneath the conversation, or when a room quietly shifts in mood. And over time, your awareness may begin doing something else. Instead of simply noticing these signals, your mind begins responding to them, adjusting your tone, changing the direction of conversation, softening a moment before it becomes awkward. Without realizing it, you may slowly begin acting as a quiet regulator of the emotional atmosphere around you. Once the mind becomes aware of emotional signals, another habit can begin forming: emotional adjustment. You may find yourself subtly shifting your behavior depending on the mood of the room. If the environment feels tense, you might speak more gently. If someone seems uneasy, you might try to lighten the moment. If a conversation feels uncomfortable, your instinct may be to smooth it out. Most of the time, these adjustments happen automatically. You are not consciously trying to manage the room. Your mind has simply learned to respond to emotional shifts. Over time, this responsiveness can begin creating a quiet sense of responsibility. Because when you notice tension that others ignore, your mind may feel compelled to address it. And eventually, the emotional tone of a room may begin to feel like something you are partially responsible for maintaining. For many people, this pattern doesn't appear randomly. It often develops gradually over time. Sometimes it begins in environments where emotional dynamics were unpredictable, where noticing subtle signals helped you understand what was happening around you. Other times, it develops in families where harmony mattered deeply, where someone quietly learned that smoothing tension helped everyone feel safer. Over time, the mind begins connecting two ideas: noticing emotional signals and responding to them. And eventually, those two experiences become linked. Awareness becomes action. Observation becomes adjustment. So when tension appears in a room, your mind may instinctively begin trying to balance it, not because anyone asked you to, but because your awareness has learned that responding to emotional shifts is something you naturally do. And that pattern can quietly follow someone into adulthood. Over time, this pattern can create an unusual experience. You may begin noticing emotional dynamics before others recognize them. A conversation becomes tense. Someone feels uncomfortable. The mood of the room shifts slightly. And while others continue speaking normally, your awareness is already processing the change. In those moments, part of your mind may feel responsible for stabilizing the situation, even when no one expects you to. You might soften the conversation, change the tone, redirect attention, all in an effort to restore emotional balance. But over time, this habit can create a quiet weight, because when someone constantly monitors the emotional atmosphere around them, they rarely experience the room without also feeling responsible for it. And awareness, when it turns into responsibility, can become surprisingly heavy. Over time, this pattern can create an unusual experience. You may begin noticing emotional dynamics before others recognize them. A conversation becomes tense. Someone feels uncomfortable. The mood of the room shifts slightly. And while others continue speaking normally, your awareness is already processing the change. In those moments, part of your mind may feel responsible for stabilizing the situation, even when no one expects you to. You might soften the conversation, change the tone, redirect attention, all in an effort to restore emotional balance. But over time, this habit can create a quiet weight, because when someone constantly monitors the emotional atmosphere around them, they rarely experience the room without also feeling responsible for it. And awareness, when it turns into responsibility, can become surprisingly heavy. But there is an important distinction. Noticing emotional dynamics is not the same as being responsible for them. Awareness allows you to observe the emotional tone of a room, to recognize subtle shifts, to understand how people may be feeling. But responsibility implies something different. It suggests that the emotional balance of the room depends on you. And often, that belief develops quietly, because when someone becomes skilled at reading emotions, others may even begin relying on that awareness. They may naturally turn toward the person who seems calm, or perceptive, or emotional.